Greetings and welcome to Caribbean Vanguard. There is a situation that is brewing in the Caribbean and it can get very ugly. It is about to get ugly. Any of these accusations and the claims that I'm hearing about happen to be true. If they are true, then some people, some respectable figures, huge names in the Caribbean, the Virgin Islands to be specific, the US Virgin Islands, will spend some time behind bars. And it's not good, but I am all for it. If these things are true, I support putting them behind bars. Okay, we can't tolerate the craziness, the selfishness that is affecting not just them, but it affects all of us, because then you get everybody in our business and so forth, right? And we are already in a sticky situation. So in 2022, Attorney General Denise George was terminated by the governor of the Virgin Islands, Albert Bryan, for her lawsuit against JP Morgan Chase. It is alleged that this was a final draw, that he already was frustrated with Denise, and so her lawsuit against JP Morgan was the final draw because she did not inform him. Right? Ms. George had previously obtained $105 million from a settlement with the Epstein Foundation, or Epstein estate. And so now she started going after JP Morgan Chase. And you know, after that happened, JP Morgan in 2023 fired back at the Virgin Islands. They're starting to call names and it is getting ugly. But before I get to that, the lawsuit by Denise claimed that JP Morgan Chase facilitated the convicted felon Jeffrey Epstein in his abuse against women and young children. The allegation state that the bank should have known about Epstein's illegal activity as part of their anti-money laundering procedures and should have reported their client to the authorities. She accused the bank of turning a blind eye to sex trafficking operations that went on in the Virgin Islands, on the island of St. James. For those of you who live in the Virgin Islands, you're going to know what I'm talking about. There's a place called Red Hook. There's a place called Red Hook on the east end of the Caribbean. It's over there by Evander Eudora King and so forth. And there's Duffy's Love Shack and all those type of stuff over there. There is a port. You can take a boat from there to go to St. John, or go to Tortola, Virgin Gorda, and so forth. And St. James happened to be on the right side around the island, right? So I know many people who live there probably not too aware of it, but the island is not that far away. You can actually see it from St. Thomas. It's not too far. The island is only about 0.1 square miles. Very tiny island. Okay, let's continue. So now in 2023, JP Morgan Chase refused to go down without a fight. They refused to go down by themselves. They started calling names of people who have been retired, who are now living their life out. So you can imagine them hearing their name being called in such an allegation. It got to be scary. Right, so here it is. JP Morgan Chase accused the US Virgin Islands of being complicit in the crimes of Jeffrey Epstein in return for money, advice, and favors. The bank said that the predator gave high-ranking USVI officials money. They even started calling names. Right? Gave them money, advice, favors in exchange for them looking away as he conduct his business on his getaway island. In a quote, they said, rather than stopping him, they helped him and gave him millions of dollars in tax incentive and other benefits. Imagine that. You got people in the Caribbean, in the Virgin Islands, who's been there for many, many years, and they don't get this type of treatment. And that is why I say I am all for taking them down if this is true. A spokesperson of the Virgin Islands Attorney General Office responded to CNBC. They responded to these allegations by JP Morgan Chase and state that this is just an attempt for JP Morgan or of JP Morgan to shift the blame away from them. But JP Morgan asked a judge to deny any motion of the Virgin Islands to preclude them from raising certain so-called affirmative defenses to the lawsuit. They accused the Virgin Islands of only wanting to strike down those specific defenses that threatened to expose its relationship with Epstein. It is alleged that 3 governors over the past 16 years had some close relationship with Epstein. John D. Jung, Kenneth Mapp, and the current governor, Albert Bryan Jr. They may all have some ties to Jeffrey Epstein. Governor Bryan, the current governor of the Virgin Islands, is scheduled to be deposed on June 6. I'm going to look out for that to see what happened, because a CEO of JP Morgan has already been deposed on 26 May. He was deposed, right, or taken down out of his place. In its filings, JP Morgan noted that when Epstein was released from Florida jail after pleading guilty to procuring a minor for sex, he tried to arrange for his parole to be transferred to the U.S. Virgin Islands, where he registered as a sex offender. He also maintained his primary residence in the territory, which placed him under the USVI's law enforcement's direct jurisdiction and supervision. The bank alleges that there has been decades-long quid pro quo between Epstein and the U.S. Virgin Islands. And those quid pro quo came in 3 forms. The first one was that high-ranking USVI officials spent years courting and gladly accepting Epstein's influence in a form of gifts, favors, and political donations. The second, USVI granted Epstein preferential treatment in the form of millions of dollars in tax incentives. And the third, the USVI protected Epstein, fostering a perfect conditions for Epstein's criminal conduct to continue undetected. The bank continues saying, or continued in its filing, stating that Epstein supported the candidacy of Stacey Plaskett, the Virgin Islands delegate to the U.S. House of Representatives, after she worked for the USVI Economic Development Authority, which awarded Epstein massive tax benefit. Plaskett had also worked at a law firm that represented Epstein in his business affairs. Epstein and his employees also donated over $30,000 to Plaskett's congressional races. The filing said that the primary conduit for spreading money and influence through the Virgin Islands government was then First Lady Cecile D. Jong, the wife of former Governor D. Jong, who served from 2007 to 2015. And despite her public role and official duties, the First Lady managed Epstein's USVI-based companies, receiving from Epstein a salary, bonuses, and other benefits. Oh man, it's getting bad. In another heavily redacted section, the filing says that the U.S. Virgin Islands aided Epstein's criminal activity. The specific allegations, however, was blacked out. Almost completely redacted, there was a filing that entitled Epstein exerted influence over the USVI sex offender legislation and received lax monitoring. They said that while the USVI did conduct site visit of Epstein's residence, those inspections were cursory at best. They were very lackadaisical. And I could see that. This man lives on another island, away from the police station. So he had life good. He was living life good, if that's the case. The filing states that Epstein could not freely transport and exploit young women without the assistance from the U.S. Virgin Islands government officials. Let me read that again. Epstein could not freely transport and exploit young women without the assistance from USVI government officials. In exchange for Epstein's cash and gifts, the USVI made life easy for him. The government mitigated any burdens from his sex offender status, and it made sure that no one asked too many questions about the transport, keeping of the young girls on the island. It is bad. It is bad. Again, if any of this is true, lock them all behind the prison bar because they are making life harder for everyone else on the islands. All right, so that's all I have for now. Until next time, be blessed, subscribe to the channel, and take care of yourself.